Hello, nerds. I've got Evan Lowe in the nerd zone. He is running for Congress in the 15th District of California, which happens to be my own district. So I'm going to be interviewing someone who's potentially going to represent my interests. Welcome to the show, Evan, and hello, nerds.
Hello, fellow nerds, and hi, Tom. Thanks so much for having me. Happy Friday, too, and happy early New Year to everyone as well.
Love it. Love it. Well, thanks so much for coming on. For those who don't know you, can you just start with a little bit of an introduction to yourself?
Of course. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for taking some time to care about our community and our society. For those of you who I have not had the pleasure to meet, my name is Evan Lowe, and I currently serve as a state legislator in the state of California, and the district I represent is here in Silicon Valley. Before that, I was on the city council and mayor of the city of Campbell, and then also for many, also served as national campaign co-chair for the Andrew Yang for President campaign in the essence and the spirit of making sure that we continually advance the issues that we collectively care about, but also activating so many who previously were on the sidelines. Maybe perhaps were not exposed to government or politics, but found an opportunity on so many different issues and policies that we can help galvanize around. And so those are some of the key things that I've been focused on, as well as co-chairing the California Technology and Innovation Caucus in the state legislature as well. So those are some of the passion areas that I had in mind, and looking forward to hoping to continue that effort and the trajectory in Congress representing here in Silicon Valley.
Love it. So, given your connection to the Yang Gang and work with the Yang 2020 campaign, does that mean we might get another basic income kind of advocate in Congress if you got elected?
Not maybe. In fact, after the presidential campaign cycle, I introduced a number of legislative proposals mirroring that of universal basic income (UBI), as well as seeing a number of different pilots that have also been mirrored throughout other jurisdictions in the state of California, and helping to demonstrate that the concepts of the policy is important and there's great value. And how do we help amplify that from a local, a state, a regional level as well? So the work and the legacy continues on in so many of us. And then that's why, again, I'm so inspired by individuals like yourself who also see the importance of making sure that we're holding our elected representatives accountable. But hopefully, more importantly, or equally important, I should say, is that we also help acknowledge and bring in others who may not be political in that typical type of framing, but helping to make sure that the water is warm and that yes, you too can do this too, and that you do not need to have a political pedigree, but if you care about our country and if you care about our future, please participate.
How did you decide to run, Evan? I mean, it's not a small decision to go for U.S. Congress. This is probably going to be a very contested primary. There's a lot of people, who've been who've been waiting for this seat to open up. And tell us about your decision to run.
Yeah. Well, Tom, doesn't every Asian American grow up saying that they want to become a politician? Isn't that what our family taught us to do?
Yeah,
No,
that's right.
yours?
Right after engineer.
um, of course, it's doctor, lawyer, engineer,
Yeah.
accountant. As an Asian American, fourth generation Asian American, born and raised in San Jose, I too was supposed to become a doctor like my father, but disappointed him in that sense. But he also sees the importance about participation and why civic engagement is so incredibly important. You asked a question about the landscape of a member of Congress in the state of California. Each state legislator, I am a state assembly member, each state assembly member, we represent and work for approximately 500,000 people. Congressional districts are close to 800,000 people. And so when you think about the scope and the magnitude, there are great similarities. Whereas, for example, in other states, a state legislator, whether it be in New Hampshire, represents just a few thousand people. Um, California's districts are the largest in the country of us at a state level. So when we're thinking about also our region of Silicon Valley, This, of course, we are biased, but we are the home, the epicenter of innovation, of venture capital, of the thought leaders, of also cultural diversity. So we think of ourselves pretty uniquely here. We in this district expect exceptionalism. And that's why I'm excited about this opportunity to be able to work for individuals like yourselves, to be able to hope to earn the trust and support, because our district is going to expect a lot from its elected representatives. And I'm confident that I'll be able to make our district proud in Congress.
What would an exceptional congressperson look like in the next couple of years? I was looking at a news report that suggested that the current Congress, I think, has been one of the least productive. With like 27 bills passed versus typically a few hundred. What does exceptional congressional representation look like to you?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge a few things, which is one, when you say around a dinner table, a normal conversation around friends and family, and you say the word politician or politics, people's eyes will start to roll. Politics is seen as a dirty word. We don't like conflict. And you think about the approval ratings of the members of Congress in the low 20s, but yet members of Congress in their district, respectively, get reelected. The fact of the matter is that we already live in a gerontocracy, and there is a disconnect between that of so many that feel like government doesn't work for them for a wide variety of different reasons. Perhaps it's not accessible. When you think about the average age, for example, in the United States Senate, the median age is 65 years old. That is not reflective of our current generations, much less the generations like your son, in which these issues would have a disproportionate impact on them than, let's say, an older generation. So it's important that we have a wide variety of different perspectives and lived experiences. So, as someone who is 40 years old, myself, born and raised in Silicon Valley, I talk about the challenge and struggles that I cannot afford to live in the community that I hope to represent, or the one that I currently represent. I cannot afford a home, a single family home. But don't feel sorry for me as an elected representative. This is really about the social safety net and about our social contract that we are fundamentally setting up our society up for failure, not for success. And so, how do we reframe and restructure so much of this? Now, much of this, of course, many would say, well, we've heard this story before. This is a rhetoric, but what will you do differently? And the fact of the matter is, I'm only one of 435 if I were to be successful. And longevity is important to gain seniority and tenure to actually effectuate change. But hopefully, will be able to demonstrate that I do, as someone who's 40, will have a long runway of longevity and energy to show that I'll be able to deliver back for our district. So there's much that goes into that with respect to tenure, bringing back the bacon, so to speak, and the resources for our district, but also in Silicon Valley, the competency of these issues. I know so many those that are watching have previously cringed when you saw the congressional oversight hearing of the CEO of TikTok, or whether it be the CEO of Meta, or when we're talking about AI, that so many of these questions from regulatory individuals or elected officials kind of, you just cringe and say, that I can't believe you asked the question about, does this access the internet? Um, Things that demonstrate there's a lack of understanding, fundamental understanding of technology that exists. So we need to make sure that we are represented in DC.
Evan, what would be some examples of things that you're proud of that you accomplished as a state assembly person that kind of give a hint of what you might be able to try and do in Congress?
Oh, there's so many, but specifically one in this region. I talked about the importance of technology and innovation, specifically coming from our district. When I first got elected close to a decade ago, we were in the midst of transportation network companies, TNCs, the Ubers, the Lyfts, DoorDashes of the world, and trying to make sure that there's parity with taxi cabs and the regulatory framework. But I remember talking about a legislative proposal that I had with respect to the shared economy, and I was talking to a state senator, and the senator said to me, "What is Uber? Uber, not Uber. What is Uber?" And then proceeded to pull out a flip phone. And it dawned on me, and I said, "Oh my goodness, this demonstrates to me the much needed work that is required in having competent uh, elected officials of this nature of technology and innovation." And so that's why it was very important that I created and founded the Technology and Innovation Caucus to make sure that we are talking about the future of work, the innovation, how to make sure that we're bringing workers along with the innovation. If we're talking about autonomous vehicles, how do we make sure that this is also going to be in the best interest of good paying union jobs, truck drivers alike, and that we're all thriving together? So when we're talking about changing that narrative, that is important. I'd also say just some personal things to me as an individual too. For us as Asian Americans, we didn't have our own holiday, and so I authored Lunar New Year as an official state holiday in the state of California. After California, now Colorado and New York has similar legislation that has also passed, and we're hoping to see much more. Our community in the Bay Area consists of close to 40% of our population in the Bay Area consists of Asian Pacific Islanders. So it's important, especially as we're talking about efforts to stopping Asian hate. What do we need to do to uplift members of our community and recognition in that way? And then also, we're seeing the attack of the United States Supreme Court rolling back protections that have been afforded for generations, and Roe v. Wade being overturned, and reproductive rights being assaulted, as well as LGBTQ rights. And I've authored a constitutional amendment that we in California will be voting on in November to enshrine constitutional protections for same-sex couples to marry, as well as interracial marriage. I know that sounds crazy, but it is true, and that's the reality that we're dealing with. But constitutional protections for interracial and same-sex couples to marry.
Well, that you've definitely been busy in the assembly, and I'm curious about your take on the technology stuff, given that this is the district of Silicon Valley, and AI is such at a momentous phase. What's your take on what should government's role be in regulating, if at all, artificial intelligence? And it just seems like it's moving so fast. Even companies in the private sector can barely keep up. I wonder how will Congress and the federal government, you know, interact with this kind of huge trend and potentially like game changing, you know, technology innovation we're seeing.
Well, Tom, I mean, even for our fellow nerds and yourself too, that we lack the awareness and the subject matter expertise to be able to catch up. In fact, uh, in my experience in close to 20 years now in government, by the time we look at the regulatory framework, technology has already surpassed
Hmm.
the legislation and the framework. So, how do we make sure that government is not seen as an adversary, but a partner in making sure that what is the fundamental role of government? The fundamental role is the safety net, the consumer protection to protect everyday individuals. So how do we do that without stifling innovation? And of course, when we're talking about innovation, fiercely competitive in the marketplace of capitalism. So how do we understand this? This is also disruptive by nature, and that we need to make sure that from an equity lens, that we address these issues of inequities. Again, I talked about it earlier about the loss of jobs. What does this mean about how we make sure that we still have good union paying jobs that support the workers, and or if this does become a loss of jobs or interpreted as such, how do we focus on making sure that we're reskilling and retooling individuals for this type of economy as well too? Because the fact of the matter is, in California, in comparison to other states, we are competing. Other states are rolling out the red carpet. Um, they're they are rolling the red carpet, putting the regulatory framework however the company likes. That's not the approach I believe. I believe that we should be in partnership for consumer protection and addressing some of our key values of workers as well. We're very much a pro-worker state, while also making sure that we don't cede our authority to a number of other countries as well too. So it's a very difficult needle to thread. But if you think about the current existing structure that exists, you'll see maybe elected representatives who may not be as well equipped on the ground, on the boots, and thinking about what are language models, what is UI, what is UX. I mean, all of these key buzzwords, what does it actually mean in real time, in real terms? And what is the call to action for a legislator to be able to do in making sure that we can focus on the consumer protection, but not stifling innovation?
Yeah, definitely important balance to strike there. If you win, whoever will be sworn in January 25 is going to be faced with tons of difficult issues. One of them will likely be immigration and border matters. It's a delicate topic given that 97% of Americans come from some form of immigration. And I think we all see the value of it, you know. At the same time, record numbers like millions of migrant encounters per year, it just seems, and going up seems unsustainable. I'm curious, what's your take on border security and immigration in general?
Yeah, I think some of the key factors of importance are recognizing some of the more issues with respect to the moral clarity of us as a country. How is our country founded? What are the values of our country? That we're a land of immigrants, and that when you think about the secret sauce, even in our region, many will ask. By the way, of course, how do we replicate the secret sauce and the successes of Silicon Valley? And there are many that try to pop up throughout the country and throughout the world. But what makes us so unique is that we are a community of so many who are foreign born, who are CEOs of startups, educated in this country, and then also become CEOs. And that is the one of the secret sauces, areas of success for our region. So, with respect to immigration, how do we make sure that we address this issue of legal migration? How do we help address this issue, particularly in Silicon Valley, of the challenge of the clogging of the pipeline for the future? So, case in point, why is it that, for example, we would educate someone in the United States, but right after they get educated, get that degree, we then kick them out to become a job creator or a CEO of a new startup in another country, becoming job creators in that regard in another country? No, we want them here. We should be stapling green cards to those who get educated here and when to become job creators here. And it's not just high tech in Silicon Valley, it's also in the agricultural space. We do not have enough workers to do the jobs that average Americans refuse to do. That is the fact. So when we're talking about these underpinning of the type of racial tones about now that we are here and we don't want to allow and welcome put out the welcome mat for others, that's a problem. At the same time, there is legitimate concern, rightfully so, about the influx of those who are coming to this country illegally and without a comprehensive immigration reform plan. That's ultimately what we need to be able to do. And we've said this time and time again, but I think this is reaching a tipping point where this is bipartisan in its nature. But again, specifically for Silicon Valley, recognizing that we need to be inclusive, not exclusive, and not falling to the fears of the type of tropes that we see in the underpinnings of that is the enemy, and we don't want those type of individuals in our communities. No, but quite the contrary. We need to be accepting and welcoming, especially because the average American refuses to do these jobs.
What do you do for the individuals who are applying for asylum, need to wait many years for their for a court decision on their application, and often those applications are denied? That just seems like a loophole, and we should just either have an official way for people to come here or not. What's your take on that whole process? Because it just seems broken.
Thank you. Yes, it is. I mean, you're basically speaking truth. If there is such a backlog and it's not functioning as it should be, then there's a problem. And individuals are bypassing the legal system and knowing that they can then claim asylum or some other type of methods to bypass the current system. So, reforming the system in an effective manner to help address this issue of migration. But the fact of the matter is, it needs to be a comprehensive approach at the federal level. Unfortunately, because of the status quo and the gridlock from the federal government of inaction, it's then left up to the states. California, if it's its own country, would be the fifth largest economy in the world. And now you're seeing states not having the budget allocation and the resources to take care of this influx of those coming through the borders, much less even the resources to take care of our own. I mean, I hope that we can talk about the issue of those that are unhoused and unsheltered. but we don't even have the appropriate resources at the state and local levels to take care of our own American citizens, much less this influx as well too. So addressing this issue at hand from a comprehensive approach is very important, including your question at hand, which is to reform the current system, the legal system, to be more effective and also more prudent, especially when it comes to those who are skilled and trained, whether it be in agriculture or in technology. And that's something that is very near and dear, especially to Silicon Valley and tech, in which we're talking about the challenges for companies for the longevity for the future, not having individuals that are qualified and talented, thereby going to other countries and saying we need the workforce because we just don't have the type of skills and training individuals from our educational institutions. So we're going to go elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, on the highly skilled immigrant path, I've seen it myself where in the past, I've worked with individuals who graduated from some of the most selective universities in the country, and then they end up working, at a extremely esteemed tech company, and then they have to leave because they couldn't get a visa. And you're like, my God, you went through and got a graduate degree from super fancy place. You're now working at a, global leading technology company based in California, and the country will not let you stay, even though clearly we value you by paying you this enormous package and you're paying all this U.S. taxes. Yeah, it's very frustrating. But I agree with you. It should be part of a multi-pronged, comprehensive approach. But we've been talking about comprehensive immigration reform since I can remember. It doesn't seem it has never happened. What will change?
Well, I think, a couple of things too is let us be reminded of facts because I think it's important for when we're talking about the average American, when we think about immigration or the conversation of immigration, it sort of evokes a certain demographic or image to us. But when we think about, again, coming from the conversation here in Silicon Valley, all of the major global, well-known kitchen table tech companies, the CEOs and founders, many of them are foreign born and educated here in this country. And if you look at statistics and data points of trends of the past 40 years, where the trends have been for students from other countries and where they decide to get educated internationally. And the educational system for international students to the United States has dropped significantly from many places in the world. No longer it's the United States. It may be other places like China, Korea, and the United Kingdom elsewhere. No longer is the United States because of the fact they also know because of the immigration system that access to a good paying job and also um, consistency and knowing that there's going to be a pathway for them. That's also challenging for someone who wants to create and start a family. So we need to recognize that these are all intertwined and we cannot talk about it in isolation. But you asked the question about what's going to change. We've been hearing about this for a long period of time. What actually is going to change? What I'm hopeful is that we reach a tipping point in which we realize that this is a bipartisan effort. I mean, you're seeing that both Republican and Democratic administrations are talking about this not being sustainable, and that we cannot just simply put a wall up. That is not going to work. So addressing a multi-pronged fashion approach will be important, and to reframing how we think about this. And one other thing I just want to mention about this, Tom, too, is I also think about us. When I say us, as at least those in the Asian Pacific Islander community. When we think about immigration in the United States, it's also very lived experience and history is important. In fact, as a fourth generation Californian, many Chinese coming to the Bay Area were referred to as paper sons. Many were multi generational from the railroad days and in Chinatown, coming through Angel Island, the Ellis Island of the West. But through the immigration, there was no system in place to help keep immigration documents. And so individuals just referred to as paper sons. They would just say that they were family members here and come to this country. And that was a way to bypass the system. So the American history and the history of the United States, the immigration system has always been fraught with challenges and other methods to become American citizens because that's such an aspirational goal for us. And let's make sure that we continue to ensure that we still are the world leader and making sure that America is still uh, going to be the place to be, the number one place to be if you're so fortunate. And we have to create that welcome mat, that welcome wagon, while also making sure that we are supporting those who are good actors in that regard as well.
Evan, I have a lot of additional questions, but I see some in the chat as well. So I'm going to move on to some audience questions.
Great.
One from Jeremy. He's wondering if you have a favorite large language model. Are you a ChatGPT man, a Bard man, or Grok? You have a preference?
ChatGPT is the easiest one because it is the one in which, at least for many of my colleagues, um, try not to confuse with too many. So it's one, at least on the basic fundamentals, the utilization is well known for the general conversation in that regard. And what I'm excited to see when we talk about language modules is so much of the conversation on AI and machine learning is solely focused in this area. When we're thinking about upending the way we do things in the different spaces, I legitimately, Tom, will sit with a number of staff members, and we're thinking about all the different sectors and facets of government, whether it be in healthcare, how
Hmm.
machine learning AI, how does that impact healthcare, education, public safety, all housing, all of these different facets. Whereas I think the general public still thinks of it as just the issue du jour, which is that of the language module. So I think that is a very exciting approach in which I welcome so many here to best engage with us to tell us what you're seeing in real time so that we can try to grapple in real time what to do with in partnership.
All right. We got another one from Jeremy. He's saying, "What's your relationship with Ro Khanna? I saw he endorsed your campaign.
What was the question? What's with that? Is that what's the
What
question?
is what is your relationship with Ro Khanna? How has it been like?" And then the
Oh,
Jeremy says, "I saw that he endorsed your campaign."
yes, I'm so proud of my dear friend Rokana endorsing the candidacy, my candidacy, because it also demonstrates what kind of partner you want to represent our congressional delegation in Silicon Valley. How do we make sure that we are proud of our districts and seeing it reflected in Congress at the federal level? So I'm proud of that too. And he's also, of course, been a thought leader. So many, in my opinion, would see the job of a member of Congress potentially just to fly to Congress and pushing a green or red button, voting yes or voting no, but rather he's going out of his comfort zone. He's going to other places in rural America, talking about jobs, talking about Silicon Valley, talking about tech, going to other places to which he doesn't need to. He could just focus on the district that he represents, but he is deeply passionate about our country and about pushing the envelope, whether you disagree or agree with him. I think that's important. Just as I so much appreciate this conversation, I'm not here to be able to have people agree with me, but rather spark conversation to saying, here's who someone is in government. And if you like what I have to say, great. We also hope that you'll see yourselves in this role too to effectuate change and to help make government what it needs to be.
All right, we got another question from the audience from Mickey, asking about what happened to the homeless when Xi Jinping visited San Fran. I heard they moved to surrounding areas. What are some solutions to the kind of unhoused crisis affecting lots of cities and not just cities, like other parts of the country as well?
Mickey, thank you for asking this question. What it showed is some good and some bad. The good is that where there's a will and resources, there's a way. Which is that there is enough boots on the ground and resources, prioritization, in making sure that we enforce the laws. Um, Secondly, though, it is unfortunate that it's simply temporary. And it shows also the dark underbelly also of democracy and how money speaks and capitalism, which is that when it takes world leaders to come to our Bay Area and San Francisco to get it cleaned up, and then it just reverts back to normal. And um, again, it shows that where there's a will, there's a way. Where there's dedication, it's important, but we must not just simply let this be temporary. But we must help recognize that this is a comprehensive approach, and we can't just sweep away our problems and just sweep them under the rug. I mean, case in point, I mean that's just rhetoric, but actually the truth. We're literally sweeping people away, and then they congregate and come right back with some dignity and respect as well too. But it shows that when there's a focus, we can do it, and there was great public demand in making sure that we did that as well. So again, it reverts back to each and every one of you. to be able to hold government accountable to saying it does not need to be lawlessness. It does not need to be how we have seen it. And that if you wish to be involved and wish to be engaged, we are ready for you.
All right. I have one last question from the audience, and then I'll wrap up with a question that, from me. From the audience, Nick wants to know, I think this is about climate and sustainability. Do you have a preference for desalination or recovered sewage? Thinking about water supplies.
Thank you for the question, Nicholas. And what's important is that we are thinking about a multitude of approaches. How many different tools do we have in the toolbox to be able to address the issue of sustainability for the long term? Desalinization, for those who may not be as familiar or aware, of course, is to focus on the issue of sustainability. That, of course, we're in feast or famine. We have rain or sometimes long historic droughts. So how do we look at alternative ways for methods in getting some of our water in clean, drinkable, and safe ways too? And by the way, in California, we have one of the largest agricultural productions and industries in the nation, in the state of California, specifically coming from many in the Central Valley. So a very thirsty state. And so desalination provides an opportunity for us to have greater stability, but it's very costly and expensive and also has an impact on the ecosystem as well too. That is one of those methods, and it's done, for example, in places like in Israel and in the Middle East, many places in Australia. So it is a best practice, and it has its pros and cons. But that should be one of the tools that we should be utilizing. I am in support of that, not as the single responsiveness to address some of these issues of the challenges of natural disasters in our ecosystem, but one of the tools that we should absolutely explore for the long term and longevity as well too. And then also on reclamation of sewage as well, utilizing technology for many. I on the local government sat on a sanitation district, so I was very focused on solid waste and sanitation. And I think many would be grossed out if they knew that much of the drinkable water is reused as well. But it is one that is important to recognize that technology goes a long way, and that this too, reclamation and reusable, it should be another technology that we should implement as well for the long term. Because the fact of the matter is, we'll need all of these to be able to address many of these different issues. We can't just have hopes and prayers, but these technologies exist, but they also are costly. So I would be disingenuous if I was telling you that this was going to be the magic issue that will solve these problems, because it's costly and they also do have their side effects. But in government, oftentimes we're weighing out the pros and the cons and the impacts. And so if it gets dire, that is one that I think is going to get greater steam. But these are what we refer to as capital projects, long term. They aren't sexy versus operating. Operating are the day to day. And so government tends to not focus and invest as much in the capital because it's kicking the can down the road of the infrastructure that is not sexy. But what galvanizes people and get people upset or goes to the polls are the day-to-day kind of activities too. But I'm glad that you mentioned that, because we can't lose our eye on that as well.
All right. My last question for you, Evan, as a fellow Chinese American, I see a lot of the kind of heat rising around U.S.-China relations, with some concern, not only given that the U.S. and China seem to be on a little bit of a collision course, but also as an Asian American, getting kind of swept up in that kind of competitive energy. I was just reading to my kids, discussing with them the Japanese internment, and you and I, we talked about Angel Island, and alluded to like things like Chinese Exclusion Act. What is your take as a elected representative who is of Chinese heritage, as an American? Like how do you think we should move forward in a constructive, positive way in a world where there's this kind of collision course between the two superpowers, US and China?
Boy, how much longer do you have, Tom?
I know it's a heavy one, but I figured I had to ask you.
is very important. Well, a couple of things. I referenced earlier that I'm proud fourth generation Chinese American, born and raised here in Silicon Valley, but yet many I still look like a perpetual foreigner. In fact,
Hmm.
I have been asked before, who do you root for in the Olympics, Japan or the
Mm.
United States? And it's like I'm Chinese American, speaking more Spanish than I do uh, Chinese, but yet I'm not seen as a truly American. So I think this is not a unique experience for so many when we think about the challenge that exists. Unfortunately, with the xenophobia coming from the former president of the Kung Fu or the Chinese virus,
Hmm.
there's a nuance and distinctions between that of government to government that we can criticize the Chinese Communist Party, but understanding that this has reverberations and difficulties of those living here. History does repeat itself. That's what we saw during the Japanese internment. So when we're seeing legislative proposals, Tom, currently in this era, legislative proposals in Congress, sitting United States senators who have proposed banning international students coming from China getting educated in the United States. And we just talked earlier about the importance of immigration and talked about skilled and trained. But this is also counterintuitive to the University of California system, in which international students, because of the cost that they pay, help subsidize in-state tuition. So that's counter to our whole model of itself. But also, then you're seeing legislative proposals to and banning foreign nationals from owning property here. This is about capitalism and international investments too. So I think we're in a unique time in which how do we understand the nuance that yes, it's important to be critical of the Chinese Communist Party and the government, but also that also has impact on those who are American citizens here. And oftentimes there's not a distinction. Some may look at us, you and I, Tom, of understanding this distinction between that of ABC, American born Chinese, or if you're Taiwanese, or if you're from mainland, if you're from Hong Kong, much less if you're from Japan, if you're from Korea. And I think these are unique circumstances and times for us now. And that's why it's important that I hope that we can be an example of why it's important for the Asian American community to be involved, especially after the Stopping Asian Hate movement, what we need to do to answer that call for service as well.
Well, Evan, I appreciate you coming on to the show and introducing yourself and talking about all of these complex topics, off the cuff. One question that Sue had is, hey, is there a link to Evan's policies? I'm guessing your website is you're going to be adding some more policy stuff there soon.
Yes, thank you, Sue. I'm so glad that you have so many individuals who are so socially conscious and aware, and I'm watching all of this chat in real time too. I'm just loving it all. Yes, my campaign for Congress just occurred about 3 weeks ago during the holiday time frame. So we're ramping up in real time and getting those policies posted on the website shortly. But in the meantime, feel free to DM me on Twitter, formerly Twitter X, or on Instagram or any other way. I will be responsive myself. And I hope that, again, do not wait just for someone else to run for office or do politics, that you too can do this just like everyone else.
I love it, Evan. Well, maybe when you have the policy section up, we might have to get you back on and we can kind of go through some of the big ones that you're most excited about.
Looking forward to it, Tom. Much
All right.
appreciated. And thanks again.
Have a great weekend, Evan. Take care, buddy.
Take care.
Bye.
You guys. Bye bye.
All right. Evan Lowe running for Congress. I'm going to try and interview some of the other candidates running for the 16th District of California, the Silicon Valley District, my district. Um, Evan definitely seems pretty impressive. I previously had Rishi Kumar on the show, and I volunteered for his campaign. Wow, now it's 2 years ago. Um, so it'll be kind of fun to get Rishi back on. And then someone was saying that Greg Tanaka is running as well. So I'm not sure if that's true, but we're going to try and get all of CA 16 candidates and then we can kind of compare them together. What's my take on Evan? Like, very smart, articulate, seems authentic. I love the fact that he's been standing up against AAPI hate stuff. Um, And I also find him like fairly. I don't I don't want to hurt his campaign, but I find him kind of moderate in a good way as a fellow moderate. I don't feel like he's like way out there like saying, defund the police or, you know, don't do anything about the border. So yeah, we'll have to keep watching and maybe we'll get Evan back. I mean, obviously he was a co-chair of Yang's 2020 presidential campaign, and he is a big advocate for UBI. So that's a big kind of plus in the Nerds for Humanity community, I'm sure. But let me know what you guys think in the comments of Evan. And thanks to everybody in the chat for supplying all those great questions. I'm going to do two things. I'm going to thank our channel members, and then I'm going to give you my thoughts on what I would love members of Congress to focus on next year. But first, let me share a little bit of a thank you to the people who make this content possible, who are our channel members. And if you're watching on YouTube, just click that join button and you can help us keep producing the show. Our biggest supporter, of course, is Soldier One. He is a senior vice president, big time. Then next up, you've got Kristen Slevin and Bike. Kristen's been supporting the show for 47 months. Unbelievable. Hardcore, Gene, David, DK, Jackalego, Mr. History, Mona, Vaughn, Yang, Dean, Galessa, Jay Perrin, Dana, Jason, Daniel, Mickey, Yoda, and Unkiyu. I think Mickey was actually in the live chat with the Beagle, which is great. And then our entry level, only $1.99 a month. We've got Lisa, Brandon, Sophia, Doris, Emerald, Ben, Shoni, Dr. William, Karen, Mai, Brittany, just skipped. Lori, Juana, Kevin, Hope, T, Jeremy. Jeremy asked all the great questions too. David, Nicholas, Mike, Zig, Roberto, Jackson, Lantern, Cindy, and Alice. And by the way, if you guys are fans of, if you're like, yeah, I kind of like this Evan Lowe dude, you can go to ofthepeople.us because we just added him here. And you can click on the approve button and it'll move him up on the rankings. And then you can even write a review. I think I will write a review now. So I've already approved of Evan. That's a good thing about approval voting. You don't have to just pick one person. Like I can approve of a couple people. So let's see. Evan strikes me as smart, authentic, energetic, and enthusiastic about helping solve big problems like climate, homelessness, comprehensive integration, partnership with tech, and stopping AAPI hate. All good in my book. I also appreciate that he seems to have a nuanced and balanced approach to policy. Big bonus points for being a former co-chair of Andrew Yang's presidential campaign in 2020. Oh man, it would have been great to ask Evan about Yang's 2020 campaign and terminate or suspending it after New Hampshire. We'll have to get Evan back on the show, but I promise to tell you a little bit about. So go to ofthepeople.us if you want to approval vote Evan. or learn about other candidates and write reviews of them like I just did. If I were asking my congressman to prioritize, I would want them to focus on, I really do think we need comprehensive immigration reform. Secondly, I think we need more work on climate. Probably, I hate to say it, guys, but we may need to look at a carbon tax or some way to provide financial incentives to not produce so much carbon. And then I think third would be democracy reform. Those would be my three: immigration, climate, and democracy reform, like more open, more competitive primaries. Like California has a great system where they basically have pretty big primaries, and then the top two go to the general. So it's not one from every party kind of thing. But let me know what you all think would be your top three things. I would say immigration, climate, and democracy. But I'll look in the comments for what you all think are your top three priorities. And yeah, check out Evan Lowe if you want to learn more about him. Seems like he pretty solid candidate. We'll have to take a closer look at him and all the others soon. Bye, nerds.